Babak was born in 795 or 798 in Balalabad in the Mimit district of the Ardabil area, which was part of Azerbaijan, a region in north-western Iran. The Mimit district had provided the Sasanian Margrave of Ardabil with troops during the Muslim conquest of Iran in 633-654, which resulted in the fall of the Sasanians and the conquest of Azerbaijan. The region was briefly occupied by the Khazars in 730-731, and had since the mid-8th century been under occupation by the Arab Rawatid clan. Azerbaijan was populated by an Iranian people known as the Adhari, who, although closely related, were distinct from the Persians. They spoke Adhari, which according to the 10th century geographer al-Maqdisi, was similar to Persian. Babak was most likely himself not of pure Persian extraction, but of Adhari. His mother Maru, meaning moon face, was a non-Muslim wet nurse from Azerbaijan. She is described as being one-eyed in Muslim sources and furthermore, by al-Tabari, as having become pregnant with her son after being raped by a mercenary. However, these stories are more than likely fabrications created by hostile authors in order to disgrace Babak. As for the identity Babak's father, there are also multiple conflicting accounts. Al-Waqidi, as quoted by Ibn al-Nadam, states that he was an oil seller from al-Madin, Ctesiphon, who had settled in Azerbaijan. Crone takes this to mean that he was of Iranian origin. However, Dinawari, a contemporary of Babak, concludes and states that there is ample evidence to support that his father's true name was Mutahir, a descendant of Abu Muslim through his daughter, Mima. Bosworth argues that more credence should be lent to this latter account, as other sources are hostile and are eager to propose lowly or otherwise less honorable origins for Babak. In the other sources, his name is variably given as Abdallah, Murtaz, Matar, Amir ibn Abdallah, or Amir ibn Ahad, all which suggest that he was seemingly a Muslim. Likewise, Babak's father is also the subject of derogatory fabrication in Muslim sources. Masudi noted in his 3 Murjal Dahab wa ma dinal Jahir 3 what seems to us to be true and proven is that Babak was a son of Mamahir, the son of Abd Muslim's daughter Mima, and that the Mem plus U group of the 4 Oram plus S took their name from this Mima, not from Mima the daughter of God's Prophet. 3. The original faith of Babak is uncertain. He was born with the Muslim name of Al-Hassan, and his 3 brothers, Muawiyah, Abdallah, and Ishaq, also had Muslim names. Having Muslim name is not in itself proof of any religious beliefs, as it was not uncommon for people to have a Muslim name in order to move freely in Muslim society by virtue of their high position in their own community, such as the Armenian princes. Crone. According to Crone, who follows Al-Waqidi, Babak's parents were probably no more than landless villagers, but knew that Babak and his brothers' futures lay with the Arab warlords of Azerbaijan, and thus as a way of adapting to the standards of New the World, raised them as Muslims. During Babak's youth, his traveling father was killed near Sabalam. Till the age of 12, Babak worked as a cowherd, and afterwards entered the service of an Arab warlord named Shibli ibn Asdi in Sarab, where he worked as a groom and servant. The gilman, slaves, of Shib taught Babak how to play the lute. Babak also learned to recite poetry, probably in the local Adhari dialect. According to the 11th century writer Abu Mayali, Babak played the lute and sang songs for the locals whilst working as a fruit vendor in the village. Babak later established himself in the city of Tabriz. There he worked under another Arab warlord, Muhammad ibn Rawat Azdi, for 2 years, until he reached adulthood and left for his village, Balalabad. There he worked under another Arab warlord, Muhammad ibn Rawat Azdi, for 2 years, until he reached adulthood and left for his village, Balalabad. There Babak encountered a wealthy and influential landlord named Javidhan, who was reportedly impressed with the latter's cleverness, and as a result recruited him into his service. Unlike the previous men Babak had served, Javidhan was a local Iranian, and the leader of one of the 2 Kurmite movements in Azerbaijan. The leader of the other Kurmite movement was a certain Abu Imran, who often clashed with Javidhan's forces. During one of the clashes, Abu Imran was defeated and killed, whilst Javidhan was mortally wounded, dying 3 days later. Javidhan was succeeded by Babak, who had already converted to Kurmism under the latter service. It was most probably during this period that Babak changed his name from Hassan to Babak. In 755, Abu Muslim was murdered. Although he had helped the Abbasids to defeat the former caliphs, the Umayyad dynasty, the ruling caliph had given the order to kill him, probably because of his increasing popularity among Iranians and non-Muslims. Many Iranians, who had expected more freedom and more rights from the new rulers, could not believe that their hero was killed by the ruling caliph whom they had considered a friend of Iran and Iranians. This incident led to many revolts, mostly by angry Khorramdi and some Zoroastrians. This, in turn, forced the caliphs to use more violence against the Iranian population in order to keep the eastern provinces under control. The constant revolts did not come to an end in the following decades, and the Iranian population of the caliphate was constantly being oppressed. Babak joined the Khorramdi. The story of joining the Khorramdi movement is being told in Waite's account, in summary, as follows. Two rich men named Jabidhin B. Sharak, and Abu Emran were then living in the highland around the mountain of Bad and contending for the leadership of the highlands' Khorramdi inhabitants. Jabidhin, when stuck in the snow on his way back from Zanjan to Bad, had to seek shelter at Bilalabad, and happened to go into the house of Babak's mother. Being poor, she could only light a fire for him, while Babak looked after the guest servants and horses, and brought water for them. Jabidhin then sent Babak to buy food, wine, and fodder. When Babak came back and spoke to Jabidhin, he impressed Jabidhin with his shrewdness, despite his lack of fluency of speech. Jabidhin therefore asked the woman for permission to take her son away to manage his farms and properties, and offered to send her 50 dirhams a month from Babak's salary. The woman accepted and let Babak go. Under the direction of his mentor Jabidhin, a leader of one of the sects of the Khorramdi, Babak's knowledge of history, geography, and the latest battle tactics strengthened his position as a favorite candidate for commander during the early wars against the Arab occupiers. Babak was a highly spiritual person who respected his Zoroastrian heritage. He made every possible effort to bring Iranians together, and also with leaders such as Mazir, to form a united front against the Arab Caliph. According to the medieval historian, Ibn Isfandiar, who compassed the book Tabaristan, History of Tabaristan, Mazir said, Mazir, Afshan Kader son of Kavas, and Babak had made an oath and allegiance, the Guru. Take the government back from the Arabs, and transfer the government and the country back to the family of the Khosrows, Sasanians. However, one of the most dramatic periods in the history of Iran was set under Babak's leadership between 816 and 837. During these most crucial years, they not only fought against the caliphate, but also for the preservation of Persian language and culture. After the death of Jabidhin, Babak married Jabidhin's wife, and became the Khormis's leader, sometime in the year 816-17 during Al-Mamun's reign. Babak incited his followers to rebel against the caliphate. According to Vladimir Minorsky, around the 9th-10th century, the original sedentary population of Azerbaijan consisted of a mass of peasants, and at the time of the Arab conquest was compromised under the semi-contemptuous term of Ulaj, non-Arab, somewhat similar to the Riaya of the Ottoman Empire. The only arms of this peaceful rustic population were slings, see Tabari, 213-79-89. They spoke a number of dialects, Adhari, Al-Dazari language, Talishi, of which even now there remain some islets surviving amidst the Turkish-speaking population. It was this basic population on which Babak leaned in his revolt against the caliphate. At that time of Babak, there were Khorramis scattered in many regions of Iran, besides Azerbaijan, reportedly in Tabaristan, Khorasan, Balkh, Isfahan, Kashan, Qam, Ray, Karaj, Hamadan, Loristan, Khuzestan as well as in Basra, and Armenia. Tabari records that Babak claimed he possessed Javidin spirit, and that Babak became active in 816-817. In 819-820 Yahya ibn Mu'ad fought against Babak, but could not defeat him. 2 years later Babak vanquished the forces of Isa ibn Muhammad ibn Abi Khalid. In 824-825 the Caliphal general Ahmad ibn al-Junad was sent against Babak. Babak defeated and captured him. In 827-828 Muhammad ibn Humatusi was dispatched to fight Babak. He won a victory, and sent some captured enemy, but not Babak, to Mammon. However, about 2 years later, on June 9, 829, Babak won a decisive victory over this general of Hishtadser, Muhammad ibn Humad lost his life. Many of his soldiers were killed. The survivors fled in disarray. Babak's victories over Arab generals were associated with his possession of Bad Fort, an inaccessible mountain stronghold according to the Arab historians who mentioned that his influence also extended even to the territories of today's Azerbaijan. 3 southward to near Ardabil and Marand, eastward to the Caspian Sea and the Shamaki district in Shirvan, northward to the Mukin, Mohan, steppe and the Aras river bank, westward to the districts of Jalfa, Nakhchivan, and Marand. In 835-836 the Caliph al-Mu'tasim sent his outstanding general Action against Babak. Action rebuilt fortresses. He employed a relay system to protect supply caravans. Babak tried to capture the money being sent to pay Action's army, but was himself surprised, lost many men and barely escaped. He did succeed in capturing some supplies, and inflicting some hardship on his enemies. Amongst Babak's commander, various names have been mentioned including Azin, Rostam, Tarkan, Nuriya, and Abdullah. The next year Babak routed the forces of Action's subordinate, Bug al-Khabar. In 837-838 al-Mu'tasim reinforced Action, and provided him clear military instructions. Patiently following these enabled Action to capture Babak's stronghold of Bag. Babak escaped. Al-Mu'tasim sent a safety guarantee for Babak to Action. This was taken to Babak, who was very displeased. He said, "Better to live for just a single day as a ruler than to live for 40 years as an abject slave." He decided to leave the country for the Byzantine Empire, and on his way Babak met Sal Sambadian, Sal ibn Sunbad in Arab sources, Prince of Kachin, who was Armenian due to the Armenian historiography and Caucasian Albanian due to the Azerbaijani historiography. Sal Sambadian, however, handed Babak over to Action in return for a large reward. Al-Mu'tasim commanded his general to bring Babak to him. Action informed Babak of this and told him since Babak might never return, this was the time to take a last look around. At Babak's request, Action allowed his prisoner to go to Bag. There Babak walked through his ruined stronghold one night until dawn. Eventually, Babak, his wife, and his warriors were forced to leave Babak. After 23 years of constant campaigns. He was eventually betrayed by Action, and was handed over to the Abbasid Caliph. During Babak's execution, the Caliph's henchmen first cut off his legs and hands, in order to convey the most devastating message to his followers. The legend says that Babak bravely rinsed his face with the drained blood pouring out of his cuts, thus depriving the Caliph and the rest of the Abbasid army from seeing his pale face. A result of the heavy loss of blood. He was then gibbeted alive, whilst sewn into a cow skin, with the horns at ear level, to gradually crush his head as it dried out. Babak Khorramdi was not well known outside academia until the 20th century. However, due to Soviet nation-building efforts, and Babak's following of teaching of Mazdak with its proto-socialist themes, Babak Khorramdi was proclaimed a national hero in the Azerbaijan Soviet Socialist Republic. For example, the Soviet-era scholar Ziya Bunyadov claimed that Babak was a national hero of Azerbaijani people, while the Russian ethnologist, historian, and anthropologist Viktor Schnierman dismisses Bunyadov's theory, criticizing Bunyadov for not mentioning that Babak spoke Persian, and ignoring the witness accounts of Babak's contemporaries who call him Persian. To this day, in the modern Republic of Azerbaijan, Babak is a cult figure, and celebrated as a national hero. In modern Iran, due to the rise of nationalism in the 20th century, and renewed interest in pre-Islamic Iran, Babak Khorramdi was rediscovered during the reign of Reza Shah, and is celebrated as a national hero. However, Babak remains a controversial figure in the Islamic Republic, whose idolization is criticized by some Shia clerics. Title missing.